Then we have the Stele of the Vultures. And this is a partial piece. We're going to be focusing on parts of it, but you get the idea. And here the theme is ultimately one of warfare. What we're seeing is a general leading his army, and it gets even more gruesome than that, but we'll get to that in a minute. And a stele is basically a commemorative plaque. It's a historical narrative, usually commemorating a great victory, reminding the people of what the person in charge has recently done. And what's happening is the ruler is taking over a neighboring city-state. And here's the complete stele, kind of recreated, or parts of it recreated. And what we see is the largest figure there is the ruler, and he's holding a cage of people. Don't worry, it gets worse. So here we have a cage of people being held by our ruler figure. We know he's the ruler because he's the largest figure, and hierarchy of scale tells us that he must be the most important. The people in the cage are prisoners of war, or representations of prisoners of war that he's bringing back. Now, these prisoners of war would be slaves, but not in the Southern tradition, in the American Southern tradition. Rather, these are people who would be slaves for a period of time. They would be freed eventually, and the idea was to bring back the best warriors so that they would breed eventually with the people of this city-state to create better warriors. They also bring in new genetic material. So there's a lot to this, and it's a particularly gruesome scene. What's actually happening is here we see the troops walking along, and underneath them, it may not be clear, but these are the bodies of the enemy. And they're degrading the enemy. They're showing that they're more powerful, that these people should not rise up because they were beaten once before. Now the question is, do we do this today? And the answer is absolutely. We don't go out and go to war with a country and refer to its combatants as people. We don't refer to them as Bob the baker or Bob the shoemaker. Instead, we have different terms for them. In World War I, it was the Hun, or in World War II, we had different names for the Japanese and the Germans. In Vietnam, it was Charlie, and today it's terrorists, because it's a lot easier for us to see our troops go to war, or if you're one of the soldiers, to go to war with someone who's a terrorist, who's nameless and faceless. You don't want to think about the fact that his name is Bob, and he owns a bakery, and he has 2 kids, and he's only here because he was forced to be or drafted to be. So we do much the same thing today, sort of degrading and dehumanizing the enemy. Then we have the standard of Ur, this is a recreation of it. And this is likely one narrative. First, there's warfare, then there's a banquet as a victorious celebration, and probably for cult ritual. And when we talk about cult ritual, it simply means that they're thanking their god. So we get an interesting image here. Here's what we're looking at. We get a sense of movement, especially at the bottom, where we have people walking in and offering goods, ultimately bringing goods. And this may be people bringing tribute after the battle. One of the things that many of these civilizations will do is once they defeat a people, they will demand tribute from these people. So a certain city-state might need to bring dried fish or 15% of their crops or whatever else to the ruling city-state. And we read this from the bottom up and from the left to the right. And again, we have hierarchy of scale. We know the king is the largest figure in the top register, and then in that third register from the bottom. So he appears twice in this image, here and here. And here we have a banquet, people giving thanks for the victory. At the top, we have the image of warfare. And to give you a little more detail, what we have here, and by the way, this is all inlaid stone and bone, so it's a very complex piece. But we again have the enemy being trodden over by the horses and chariots of the victorious army. And we have horses that appear to be mechanical with the little wind-up key at the top. Quite an amazing feat. But I might be making that up.